Good afternoon. Christos Voskrese, Christ is risen. Dear friends, dear members of the Serbian American Leadership Conference, we'd like to wish everybody a wonderful Saturday afternoon. We hope that you and your families are doing well, and we are very grateful for everyone who's joining us as we continue our series of video briefings and video discussions with some very interesting speakers. We have the very special honor and privilege this afternoon to be joined by the very Reverend Father Sava Janjic, the Abbot of Visoki Dečani Monastery in Kosovo and Metohija, who follows along in this series of speakers that we have had from Belgrade, from Serbia, from Republika Srpska with President Željko Cvijanović a couple of days ago, and now with Father Sava Janjic from Kosovo and Metohija. But before we get to Father Sava, I would like to introduce a gentleman that anyone who's been following us on Facebook, on social media, on YouTube, any one of you have gotten to know this gentleman pretty well, the president of the Serbian American Leadership Conference, Aleksandar Đuričić. Alex.
Thank you, Neno, for that wonderful introduction. Vaše visoko prepodobije blagoslovite. Father Sava, the Serbian American community greets you from the United States of America, particularly the Midwest and the city of Chicago, where the holy relics of St. Mardari of Libertyville and All America Wonder Worker reside. We are blessed to have you with us today, and we pray you and all of our brethren in Kosovo Metohija are safe and healthy. For several reasons, your appearance with SALC today is timely. First, it is tomorrow that our Holy Church celebrates the feast of the transfer of the relics of St. Nikolai of Žiča and Ohrid from Chicago to Valjevo, Serbia, our common saint, as he served both in our homeland and here in the diaspora. Your appearance with us is timely as the entire world suffers from the COVID-19 pandemic. It's timely because it comes a day after we remember the tragedy of Operation Flash in 1995, where approximately 15,000 Serbs of Western Slavonia were expelled from their homelands, a precursor to Operation Storm. It is timely because it comes a day before we remember the ambush and massacre of the withdrawing Serbian soldiers in Sarajevo in 1992. I bring these tragedies up because we are again witnesses to continued Serbian suffering and persecution, this time with the recent arson attacks in Kosovo and Metohija, the cradle of Serbian history and civilization, and the place of some of our most important religious sites and cultural, such as Visoki Dečani Monastery, where you are currently the abbot. In addition to uniting and organizing the Serbian American community, SALC's mission is to raise awareness about the history of crimes perpetrated against the Serbian people, both past and present, so that we can promote and ensure justice, peace, and stability in the region. It is on this mission that I believe that we are united, as you have been on the forefront of raising global awareness about Serbian suffering for decades. For that, our entire community thanks you and looks forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for joining us. Neno?
Thank you very much, Atso. Father Sava, if it's okay with you, I'm going to just jump straight into the questions in our dialogue, and we'll hopefully have the time later for maybe doing some biographical questions about you as well for some folks who may not have had the opportunity to get to know you. But as Atsa mentioned, we're in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis and unprecedented challenge. And while most of the attention of the world, the US and European countries, has been on this crisis, in the past few days in Kosovo and Metohija, we have seen a series of arson attacks targeting Serbian families and their homes. So I'd like to start by asking you, what exactly happened over the past few days, and how are the victims of these terrible attacks doing now?
Well, first of all, thank you, Neno and Alexander, for this call. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening here, afternoon in United States. I'm very glad that I have an opportunity to talk to you in this way. Probably now this situation is making us a little bit more aware that we have to communicate more, and this is a quite good opportunity, and video calls now happen to be much more frequent than previously, which is very good. I think every bad thing is bringing something good for all of us. That is more communication, more awareness of where we are, because wherever we lived, we are together in all this. We are going more or less through similar difficulties with the COVID-19 temptations, but also here in Kosovo Metohija, of course, the particular situation which you have just mentioned. Of course, warmest greetings from Visoki Dečani Monastery, from my brotherhood, and of course, blessing from our bishop, Theodosie. It's, of course, challenging time for us here, and many of us in Kosovo and Metohija, I would say that things are not really so much different than they are, because we got used to some emergency situation in the last 20 years, even longer, and it's not something very much surprising, although lots of aspects of our lives have been changed in the last 2 months. But of course, this latest wave of arson attacks and various kinds of provocations is discouraging. It usually happens in spring, I must say. March and April are not very auspicious months, so for Kosovo Serbs, particularly here in Kosovo. In 2004, we had March 17 riots, and usually in April, things also get complicated. Political situation in Kosovo is also very complicated with the government and elections. It's a long story, and but we are really disheartened to see this latest wave of attacks, which, by the way, has been condemned also by the U.S. Embassy and in Pristina, and also by the European Union here as well. So the main diplomatic representatives, also including OSCE and UN mission, they've condemned this latest wave of attacks. Of course, let me just mention some of them here, because it's really been very much condensed in the last several days. So on the 17th of April, one house was burned near Obilic, so not far from Pristina. Usually, it's mostly empty houses, which are temporarily empty. Either the owners are not here in Kosovo, or they are temporarily visiting friends. Now, of course, the boundary passes between Kosovo and Metohija and central Serbia have been closed. So we cannot at all actually enter central Serbia, and vice versa. One would have to go through the quarantine procedures, which is very complicated. And so this house was burned on the 17th of April in Novake village near Prizren. It's a Ritani village. Another house was burned on 25th of April in Crkola's Istok municipality. It's closer to this area here. There's been a theft. A car and a bull were stolen from one family. Also in the Gojbulja village, which is near Vučitrn, so between Pristina and Mitrovica, for those who know the geography here. Also, there's been some incidents. A group of Kosovo Albanians, were trying to make a burglary in the church, and but they were prevented. And I've read today that they've been arrested, and we will see the investigation. Also on the 29th of April, in the same village, there was a group of Kosovo Albanians began smashing windows on the village school, and they also wrote Kosovo Liberation Army graffiti, which is very provocating. And on the same night, on the 29th of April, in All Village, not far away, also some agricultural machines were stolen. And in the village of Cernica near Gnjila in eastern Kosovo, one house more was burned. So it's a number of incidents, which of course have made us very concerned, and the diocese, and we have reacted, we have alerted international representatives, and they have also expressed their condemnation and requested investigation. The problem is that we have had lots of these incidents, even more serious incidents in the past, but almost regularly they've never been properly investigated, and perpetrators have never been brought to justice. Usually, some interrogations are made, and the perpetrators are set free. Either the court or police, they don't do their job. So I must say that in the last 20 years, we are dealing with culture, or rather unculture, of impunity here in Kosovo and Metohija, which is very sad, and this is encouraging the extremists to attack Serbs. These are either attacks for certain for lucrative reasons. They want to steal something, but they are mostly targeting Kosovo Serbs because Kosovo Albanians can easier defend themselves. First of all, police is more ready to protect Kosovo Albanians, and they have also very strong family links, and the attackers are always aware that this could bring them into lots of trouble. So Serbs, particularly south of the River Iber, so south from Mitrovica, where the majority of Serbs live, by the way, in Kosovo and Metohija, we are being targeted. And this is again showing us that the situation is far from normal, and that beside this complicated situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are having also these problems, and generally lack of basic human and religious rights in many aspects, and respect of law is also a serious problem. We can talk about it more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Father. I appreciate you especially mentioning that these attacks have been going on for 20 years. It's shocking to think about that length of time. You now have an entire generation, perhaps a young Serbian person who was born south of the Ibar River, an entire generation which has grown up in these conditions of apartheid, we can call them. Do you ever get used to these attacks after 20 years? Does it ever become just something that you're used to, or is it always something which is shocking anew?
Well, most of Kosovo Serbs, particularly in southern enclaves, as we usually say, they are, of course, in a way used to all this. And although this is always disappointing, the people are very resilient. They are very courageous, and they're bravely coping with all this in the last 20 years. Of course, here in Dečani Monastery only, we've had quite a number of very serious incidents for armed attacks, and we are the only military protected site because KFOR, the peacekeeping mission in Kosovo, is constantly 24/7. They're keeping constant protection of the monastery with several checkpoints, and sometimes using drones and so on. So it's happening 20 years after the armed conflict. And many people in America and the world generally, they think, well, things in Kosovo are peaceful now. It's 20 years after the war. But of course, we haven't had serious incidents like armed attacks, mortar attacks, and in the last 10 years, which is encouraging. But we have had ISIS graffiti. We have had also we had in 2016 there was a group of ISIS-connected militants, armed, who were arrested in front of the monastery, and later they were found out to be on the ISIL blacklist, and they were definitely planning a kind of attack. So after that, military presence of NATO-led peacekeepers was reinforced. So now we have, beside Italians, who are longest here, we have also Austrians, Slovenians, and Moldovans, who are the member. Moldova is the member of the peacekeeping mission, although not a member of NATO. So it's not exclusively a NATO mission, although it's NATO-led mission. And Italians are most responsible. So Dečani Monastery, which is one of the most important sites and UNESCO World Heritage Site in Kosovo, has been attacked 4 times. And so when these incidents happen, of course, we are glad that nobody was killed, that nobody was hurt. But of course, the damage, burned houses and stolen possessions and agricultural machines and cattle, it's always a serious problem. And we have many times appealed for the people, for people who are willing to help and to pay up for the damage. And of course, I must say that Serbian government is also, through the Office of Kosovo Metohija, taking care to help in these cases. But of course, it's very difficult because most of our people live very poorly. They don't have regular jobs. And so this affects them very much. You know, when somebody steals a cow or burns a house, I mean, it's probably all they have. And of course, this is a very clear message. You don't belong here. You should go to central Serbia. And very often, the victims of these attacks are forced sooner or later to leave, pack up their things and leave to central Serbia. And this is the way of direct pressure to make Kosovo Serbs leave their ancestral homes and ultimately make the entire region of Kosovo Metohija completely ethnic, clean Albanian territory. And this is, I think, one of the main reasons why these incidents happen, although I must say that I cannot always be completely sure that the perpetrators have all these things in their minds. But the kind of collective vendetta against Kosovo Serbs is still going on. And quite a number of Kosovo Albanians feel that it's nothing wrong. And very often it's not properly reported, and very often their authorities would never condemn. I've not heard anybody from Kosovo authorities condemning these attacks. Some of them are calling them alleged attacks, although we have full confirmation from the police. And this is, of course, indirectly encouraging further attacks. And this is a serious problem. And internationals here are completely aware how much they report. It's not something that I fully know, but I believe that those who are working more closely with Kosovo and this region, they are aware that the situation is complicated enough.
Absolutely. And just, to highlight something that Father Savva has mentioned for our American viewers and for our Western viewers, of course, when we hear that a cow was stolen, when we hear that some sheep were stolen, that may sound like perhaps like a minor, like a nuisance thing or event, a crime. But in reality, Father, for a family in Kosovo, that those cows, those sheep could be their entire livelihood, their entire job, the way that they feed their children, right?
Yes. I mean, our monastery was very much involved during the time when our current bishop, Theodosia, when he was an abbot of the monastery, and also later we have been very much involved in humanitarian activities, helping people get the livestock, because many returnees, so the returnees are Serbs who are, their homes were burned or destroyed immediately the armed conflict after the war in 1999, and a certain number of people, a few thousand people, have returned in the meantime. And of course, their houses were rebuilt very modestly, I must say, not that what they had, but some very modest bungalows. But they didn't get anything to live from. So we worked on finding donations to help them get cows, sheep, and so on. Some of them developed these activities, and some of them really managed to find some kind of relatively normal life back again. But most of the people who have returned, they live in a very difficult situation. We also have a diocesan soup kitchens, 6 soup kitchens, which are run by our Protinica Svetlana, who is really a hero of our time, and she herself is running 6 soup kitchens, which provide food for 2,000 persons who live in poverty per day. So 2,000 meals per day, even in these difficult situations, a situation which we have now. And also she is running a farm. The Bishop Theodosia provided some agricultural land because this is a diocesan organization. And so we have a farm. We have also some agricultural work, also job opportunities for some families, and also pigs, sheep, cows, and also she's baking bread. I mean, her people are baking bread, and very often the food is distributed by cars to remote areas. It's mostly in eastern Kosovo. There's one in western part of Kosovo, in Metohija, where we are now. But this soup kitchen is now working with difficulty because the area is under quarantine. So some municipalities in Kosovo are under quarantine. So the movement in these areas is more difficult. So, but despite all this, we are continuing, and of course she is managing with lots of difficulties to provide funds and find food, especially in the situation when the boundary between Central Serbia and Kosovo is closed, and also international borders around, and this is quite complicated. But it's a hard work. But I must say, Svetlana and her 50 people who work in soup kitchens, they're doing magnificently, really. I'm admiring them.
Absolutely, thank you, and we definitely admire and appreciate their work. Now, I just want to shift gears a little bit, Father Savva, and you referenced at the beginning of our conversation these new technologies that we're using and the video conferences. And for the benefit of some of our viewers, I want to say that you actually might be the original cyber monk, if I remember correctly, from the 90s. So can you tell us and remind us, when exactly did Dečani first connect to the internet, and what was the idea behind this reaching out to the world?
Well, I must say that before I didn't have much interest in technology at all. But in 1993, somehow I was introduced quite spontaneously into all this, and so we got the first email in 1993. So 1 year after.
Was that Dečani@unet.eu or something like that, if I remember correctly?
We had a website very soon, and so 1 year after we got the first email. So it was a time with modems and these shrieking sound, which was, of course, we were very happy to get, let's say, some 15 or 20 minutes of normal modem connection to send everything we prepared. So I was working with this. It was Dečani Unet.com, and later it was also Dečani. It was actually Kosovo.com, then Kosovo.net. So Kosovo.net site is still conserved as it was in 2005 when I stopped working on it. That was a time when we were having other problems and difficulties, also with other issues, and I was involved in other things. And now we have Dečani.org, which is in fact run my father, one of our monks, and we are trying to provide as many as possible information. Also, we have a diocesan website also, and we are present now as a diocese on Facebook and Twitter. We have also the monastery is present on Facebook and Twitter, and additionally, as I happen to know quite a number of people and gathered lots of followers, I sometimes find it easier also to send some and post some information as well on my own name. But the idea is to get as more as possible people informed, especially abroad. So I'm tweeting and sending posts on Facebook in both languages, and trying to inform also English speakers. There are lots of people in the world who follow what's going on here, and quite a number of journalists. And that was my first idea, in fact, to get into contact with journalists. And at that time, I got their emails, and I was sending emails to them during the war, immediately after the war. And so they were coming here. We made interviews, and some contacts have remained ever since. And also a number of diplomats as well, who are now on senior positions, and so that helped us very much share information, and also beside frequent visits, particularly in the end of the 90s, before the bombing and the war in Kosovo, to United States and to European countries, when we were trying to, together with the previous bishop, to witness the complexity of the situation in Kosovo Metohija. So this is something that I felt that it was a kind of a duty also, beside many other duties here. First of all, of course, is the prayer and the spiritual obligations here now as an abbot, of course, but also to bear witness to what's going on and speak for those who are suffering. And we were also active at that time, particularly with the International Orthodox Christian Charities. I would like to greet, if there are some who are listening to us and looking at us now, from the International Orthodox Christian Charities. We worked also in the time of the war, also helping not only Kosovo Serbs, but also Kosovo Albanians who found refuge here. 200 Kosovo Albanian civilians found refuge in the monastery during the war. But after the war, we focused particularly on Serb returnees, as applied to the Serbian people became very intensive in the years after the war. And now, of course, the diocese is continuing with the help of benefactors and donors from all over the world, which now, of course, is a little bit more, not little, but very much difficult because of the global pandemic and the economic crisis, which is now emerging as one of the global problems in the world today.
Thank you, Father. I wanted to ask you actually a little bit also about the spiritual dynamic, the spiritual part of this global connectivity, because as you know, the way that our Orthodox Church is organized and envisioned, it's on a territorial basis. So we believers should be under the pastoral care of our local priest, who is under the homophorion of the local bishop, and really our bishop and our priest should be providing us with that pastoral guidance that we need, especially when we have crises like this. But one thing that we have in this current internet age, for example, I can be sitting here in Chicago, and I can read the opinions of a bishop in Georgia or in Cyprus, someone from around the world, which may not necessarily reflect, the opinions of our bishop here or the realities of our life here. And so you have sometimes this temptation to say, aha, that opinion is more authentic, orthodox. Maybe that's the real deal. Maybe what we're hearing here, raising some questions about this. So my question for you is, how do we deal with these types of temptations that the present age has created? And is there room in the Orthodox Church for diversity of opinion between bishops and diversity of practices?
Well, there's always been a diversity in practices. Of course, we share the same faith, and this is unquestionable. And of course, but every local Orthodox Church, Serbian Orthodox Church, Greek Orthodox Church, Church of Cyprus, Russian Orthodox Church, and wherever in the world their churches are, and also in different countries and continents. Now, Orthodox Christianity is global. I mean, they are facing particular situations, and of course, bishops there need to take certain steps and positions, adopt certain practices, which reflect, of course, the needs of the people there, of course, following the legal framework in which they live, which differs very much. I mean, the situation in Serbia, for instance, differs from the situation in Montenegro. Dramatically, and our church in Montenegro is going through very difficult times, particularly these days, which we can follow in the media. But our bishops there, led by Metropolitan Amfilohia, really are bravely coping with all this and showing tremendous resilience and Orthodox strength, which we could see also in these processions, which I participated just before the outbreak of the pandemic. The situation in Kosovo is also very specific. There are certain laws. We are fair, and according to the resolution 1244, we are in the territory of Serbia, according to the Serbian constitution. But there is a local legislation, and of course, the local administration, local institutions are taking certain decisions, and of course, we have to adapt as much as possible to be able to live here. Of course, in United States, it's different. Of course, it's different in other continents, and Greece, for instance. So that's also decisions of bishops regarding certain practices, what is possible, what is not, how to organize the parish life in these circumstances. Of course, we can see certain differences, but it's very important not to jump into conclusions and say, well, they're doing that better than we do, because every bishop has his own responsibility, and it's not an easy one this time. And of course, the priests have to find a way how to deal. Sometimes we have difference in, I guess in United States, in different states, for instance, in California and Michigan and New York, there are certain differences in legislation, and so it's not always the same. And that's why it's important to find some creative solutions, how to continue our parish life. The most important thing is to preserve the communal feeling, because we are church, because we communicate, we commune, and everything is very much centered on liturgy. And now this is very often difficult because there are certain limits how many people can, if any, can attend liturgical meetings, liturgies, and so we are witnessing different practices, how to do it. But of course, we can communicate through Skype, Zoom, and modern means of communication. But of course, we cannot share communion in this. So this is one thing that we can never do. So there are also different opinions whether we can really experience the fullness of liturgy without having the possibility to commune. And that's why it's a very challenging time, and I guess that bishops, priests will have to find various solutions. And of course, we all hope that there will be the relaxing of these measures, and that it will be easier. So in monasteries, it's different, because the monasteries are like families. They are more or less isolated, and the regular liturgical cycle is more or less unchanged. by these circumstances. But I think the parish life is particularly difficult, and so bishops are finding different ways how to move through all this. The Holy Synod of our Church has given certain instructions, of course, giving freedom to local bishops to find creative solutions in accordance with legal system in which they live. So I think we are doing the best we can, and the most important is that we feel solidarity, and that we understand that this is the time to show care for our dear ones, and particularly for the elderly who are most isolated, and also among the most critical groups affected by the COVID-19. Although there are no rules, also exploring pastoral ways of working with people who are sick, who need communion, confession. This is a much more difficult issue because it's not easy to enter these facilities. And I've seen in Russia, for instance, some priests have been trained to enter with this equipment, special equipment, into the COVID hospitals in order to provide communion and confession for those who are sick. But this is still impossible in most cases. So there are lots of challenges, and we will be seeing in the next months and say years, I hope not. We'll see how this will develop. But the Church has always been going through difficulties. We have had pandemics, and we had wars, and all kinds of difficult things. The Church always found a way how to go through it, although we sometimes forget about it and think that it was just an easy life. It wasn't at all. It was much more difficult with plague and various kinds of contagions and much more difficult circumstances. But this is really a very strange pandemic, because it is changing the life which we recently known, and many of things will probably never be exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And we have to adapt, and human beings are very adaptable beings. So the Church will find a way how to live in every circumstance, and how to provide a message of love and compassion, and particularly for the needy ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Father. And one thing that you actually mentioned now was the situation in Montenegro, to shift gears a little bit once again. And you actually, before these quarantines came into place, and while these litia were still taking place, you actually spoke at a litia in Podgorica in front of the Resurrection of Christ Cathedral, in front of tens of thousands of people. So I was hoping that you can tell us a little bit about what's happening there. But in addition to Montenegro, you also have a problem with the municipality of Decani, if I recall correctly, where there is a Supreme Court decision on monastery land which the local municipality is refusing to honor. And I'm hoping also you can tell us a little bit, why is church property ownership such a threat that people need to try to deny this ownership in today's day and age?
Well, we live in the time when, of course, holy sites are seen as a very important element of identity. And it's not just religious identity, it's also our national people's identity, better to say. And of course, our holy sites like this monastery, they are not only important for us as religious Orthodox sites, which we share with all Orthodox Christians, and also wider speaking with all Christians in the world, and as a UNESCO World Heritage Site with all cultured people in the world, and who respect these sites Of course, we have they are very important also for the local people here in Kosovo, regardless of their ethnicity and religion. But they are primarily, I mean, this monastery is primarily a Serbian Orthodox monastery, and as such, it's telling a very important history. And currently, we are facing attempts to reshape, to reinterpret the history of this region in a very, very unscientific way, and very often anti-Serbian way, so that it's. We hear, for instance, that, well, Serbs have never lived here. They just occupied all these churches don't belong to Serbs. They were built by somebody else. And Montenegro, the Nemanjic dynasty, which did so much, and our Svetosavska, the Holy Sava's church in Montenegro, actually is the pillar stone of statehood of Montenegro. Serbian Orthodox bishops of Montenegro were prince bishops, and they ruled the country. Mm-hmm. And now we are facing with a deliberate persecution through an attempt to implement a law which is very much flawed, and we were talking a lot about it before the pandemic, and also there were these processions, litias, and where we were all giving our hand of solidarity. And I'm very privileged myself that I was present at one of them, which was really amazing event. It was there were more than 80,000 people in the streets of Podgorica. I've never seen so many people at any church event in my life. And it was really impressive. This was such an outburst of faith and strength of our church. It didn't have to do anything. It didn't have anything with nationalism, with politics. Some people were accusing the church. Far from this. There were lots of children, lots of people. There was lots of joy. These were very joyous events, and now we can see that the government in Montenegro is striking back, and they're very rigorously applying certain measures against the church in cases when they don't apply in similar situations elsewhere, and which is directly violating the freedom of religion, which is very important. I think this is one of the basic democratic standards which needs to be safeguarded in any democracy. And in Montenegro, we see that this is particularly at stake. And particularly the church property and attempt to seize the holy sites and churches, making the state-owned churches, and which would practically which is a part of the wider plan to change the entire identity of the people in Montenegro, who, whatever they say they are, I mean, they are all Montenegrins, they are Serb Montenegrins, whatever they call themselves. This is their homeland, and for people who are really religious believers, there is really not much difference to say, well, I'm Christian Orthodox Serb from Montenegro, as you're from one or the other part of the United States, and you are American, and it doesn't really matter. And so much, of course, this is now becoming a serious problem with the current Montenegrin authorities. In Kosovo, the problems are different. There was an attempt in 2015 by the then government to pass a law on cultural heritage, which was opposite to the Ahtisaari annex on cultural heritage. Ahtisaari agreement was actually an attempt of reaching an agreement in Kosovo, which ultimately resulted by unilateral proclamation of independence of Kosovo by Kosovo authorities and recognition of Kosovo by a number of leading Western countries, but not the majority of countries in the world, and but also with an obligation of Kosovo authorities to unilaterally apply certain principles from the Ahtisaari Agreement, among which are the laws on protection of Serbian Orthodox religious and cultural heritage. And so these laws are very important. They cannot be changed according to the Kosovo Constitution, and the international representatives in Kosovo are standing very firm on this. This primarily means that there are special protected zones. These are zones around our most important sites, about 50 of them, in which there cannot be any inappropriate activities. Decani has additional security protection, which is something that is not directly related to this law. Also, one cannot build transit roads or do anything that is changing the ambient around the site, in which I'm particularly not doing anything that might actually deny the identity of these sites as sites of the Serbian Orthodox Church, because it's been recognized as such in the Constitution. So this doesn't exist in Montenegro, and so the situation, although easier in many other aspects, it's more complicated in this aspect in Montenegro compared to the situation in Kosovo. But of course, every law is changeable, so we need to wait for some long-term solutions, which we still cannot anticipate what they will look like. In any case, protection of our religious and cultural heritage in Kosovo and Metohija is essentially important for not only for us who live here, but for our church and for our people, no matter where we live, because these sites are, I would say, equally important for us here in Decani as for you in Chicago,
Absolutely,
or anywhere else. So that's why we have to constantly work on informing people about this important. It's not some mythological attachment to these sites. It's nothing to do with nationalism or whatever. It's actually the part of our heritage, and I think it's understandable for many in the United States, where the importance of respect to freedom of religion is one of the pillars of the society. So we expect particularly United States to stay firm on this issue in future as well.
Yes, Father, and that's definitely something that the Serbian American Leadership Conference, as an organization, I think that religious freedom is the paramount issue, the number one issue that we will the conference will be promoting, because it's so essential to human dignity. At the very core of human dignity is the right of people to worship, to believe, or even some may choose not to. But that freedom is given by God. We who are Orthodox Christians, that's what we believe. Father, it's about, if I'm looking at the clock correctly, if I'm doing the math, it's about 10 minutes to 10 p.m. In Decani now. I was hoping that you could help our viewers or explain to our viewers. You've already served Vespers today, Saturday. You have Divine Liturgy tomorrow morning. What time is liturgy? What does the daily liturgical life look like for a monk at Visoki Dečani Monastery? And are there any prayers or services between Vespers that was served this evening and liturgy tomorrow morning?
Well, on Saturday evening, we usually serve Vespers and Matins together, like Synochная, which is more closer to the Russian Typicon. We find it much easier to connect these two services in the evening, and because in the morning we will have hours, and the liturgy will begin at 8. Usually, in normal circumstances, there would be visitors to the monastery and the pilgrims. In the last few years, the number of pilgrims was really huge. There were always one or several buses of people coming, and also lots of tourists. Now, since the outbreak of the pandemic and the special measures which have been introduced and the closure of borders, we don't have visitors, and according to the blessing of our bishop, the monasteries are temporarily not receiving visitors, and because particularly we are very closely connected community. We have some brothers with some sensitive health issues which might be very risky, and bishop discerned that the best way. And also, it's also the case in many other churches. So they're more now directed to parish churches, which are providing ways how to make sure that they at least have access to the Holy Communion during the day tomorrow. Of course, there is a limited number of people who can attend services. We will be having the liturgy as usual, and also we have the entire cycle of prayers and services, but it's exclusively now for the monks who live in the monastery, and this is our daily life. So we have also not we are also not also traveling anywhere. So we are living in kind of self-isolation ourselves, trying to apply all these safety protective measures as much as it depends on us, of course, and because of course we have full faith in God, and but of course our Christian faith is not something that automatically is protecting us. So we should never really test God with our faith. I mean, we should do everything that we can to protect primarily others and ourselves. And then, of course, if we are dealing with a situation, okay, we will deal with it if it happens, and we will find a way how to do it in the most responsible way. So this is a basic principle, I think, in these times, that we have to pay attention to the safety of our dear ones, and particularly the elderly people, those with medical issues and who are more sensitive, and be optimistic and know that this is only temporarily, and help civilian authorities in the way not to create a situation where the pandemic can spread further. In Kosovo currently there is about 800 cases of coronavirus infected. Of course, the number of tested people is relatively small. It's just 6,000 people altogether. So what is the real number of infected is very difficult to know. So I must say that miraculously, by some great help of God, the Serbian inhabited areas south of the river Iber have been spared. We don't have any even reported cases. But in North Kosovo, this area is more affected, and there are about 100 cases and several deaths as well, mostly people with health conditions. And so the situation is different in this respect. So our parish priests are applying the rules as much as possible, depending where they are and how the things are developing. The bishop is following everything very closely. He's in Gračanica, and but he takes care about all of us with his prayers primarily, and daily contact with all of us. So at the monastery, our life is more or less as usual. I mean, it's we live a kind of isolation. Monastic life is a kind of self-imposed isolation in order to devote ourselves thoroughly to prayer, reading, and also managing the daily life of monastery. We have a farm as well. We have fields, and there's lots of farm work now. And also we have Father Kirilo, who is in our vineyard in Velika Hoća and winery, so we have to produce wine. So it's all important for our daily life. But of course, with the lack of visitors, and particularly with no visitors and tourists, and some kind of normal life is, of course, imposing a particular kind of situation to last as long as necessary.
Yes, and actually that leads me, Father, to my next question, because, and by the way, please tell Father Kirilo that his wine is very good. I've had it, and I really do like it, and I wish that we could find more of it here in the United States. But you lead me to my next question, which is the pilgrims and the tourists who come to visit our holy sites in Kosovo Metohija. I understand that they provide a very important source of income for our monasteries through their donations, through purchasing wine, purchasing monastery products, and of course with this current crisis and pilgrims are not able to visit, that's affecting our monasteries financially. If there are people who are watching who would like to donate or who would like to help out, where should they go? Which sites should they visit, Father?
Well, our main internet portal is decani.org. We are also present on Facebook, Twitter, but of course decani.org is our main site. There, of course, we have a web shop. Currently is not operating because sending of our products is more complicated because of flights and these postal services which don't work normally. So I'm not quite sure whether we can send anything abroad at the moment. We hope this will soon work. We hear about relaxing of some measures. Hopefully that would be much easier. Of course, with closed boundary passes and international borders as well, it's there are practically, even if any pilgrim group would like to come, they would not be able to enter. Majority of our visitors were from out of Kosovo, mostly from central Serbia and Montenegro, which is now totally impossible. They would have to go through quarantine and all these procedures. And so there is a way to help with a donation. We have a PayPal account, which is probably the easiest way how to do it on our site. So on the English version of our site, there is a way how to make a donation in dollars, euros, whatever. And this is the best way how to do it. Also, another way, generally for the diocese, for our people, as many of our believers and dear friends and know, it's also through our bishops and as well, and parish priests. So one can really choose different ways how to help. Of course, you can share the link of our PayPal account if somebody would like to help, because we are a big monastery, but of course we are also a community that still is very much depending on selling of our products, which is currently quite difficult. It's wine and candles, and at least we have enough food for because we really grow some food and have our own farm. But of course, we have to take care of how long this will last and how much we will be affected. Of course, some other monasteries are also affected by this in their own ways, and Bishop is trying to find different ways how to relieve this. I guess the Serbian government will find way how to help, although I'm not quite informed about any particular packages. I've not heard that there has been any international help directed to the monasteries, generally to some Serbian medical facilities, yes, because they function independently from Kosovo medical facilities. But now in this misfortune, we're all together, and I'm also encouraged to see even some cooperation, because we are dealing with the same problem, and that's probably an opportunity to understand that we are, after all, human beings, and that we have to show solidarity with one another in these circumstances. We're all together in this. So I would really like to thank to all of us who listened to us. It's 22:01. We are 1 hour almost full. I would like to thank everybody who was watching us, listening us, and to all our friends and some relatives as well in the United States and Chicago area, particularly to our dear bishops there who are so much loved and respected for love and care and thinking of Kosovo and Metohija, for Serb American Leadership Conference, for organizing events, and for you to both Neno and Alexander this was really amazing that we have been together, and there will be another opportunities. And
absolutely, Father. Thank you very much on behalf of the Serbian American Leadership Conference. I want to thank you for setting aside the time for us to have this virtual dialogue, this virtualno druženje, virtual fellowship. But even in this virtual, even though this was virtual because we're not presently together, and I know from our folks who have visited Dečani Monastery how much you and the Brotherhood love to provide hospitality to pilgrims and to visitors. But one thing which even in our virtual druženje is very real and very present is the feelings of affection that we and Serbian Americans have for Dečani, for your monastery, but for all of our monasteries on Kosovo and Metohija, and for all of our monks, for all of our nuns who have devoted themselves to the spiritual life, to praying for us. Sometimes I think we all feel that they are keeping this world intact with your prayers, but also for our people who live in very difficult circumstances and who bear witness to all of us, a very dignified witness. So thank you very much, Father Savva, for that. I want to thank our viewers as well. I hope that the last hour was informative for you. We will be posting links to the Dečani Monastery website and where you can get some more information. I would like to also just keep you informed. Please check our social media. Please check our Facebook sites, our Twitter, and our Instagram. We will have on May the 4th, so coming up in 2 days, the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Serbia, Dr. Vladimir Marinkovic. He will be speaking with you here live, just like we spoke with Father Savva today. And he is also the founder of the Serbian American Friendship Congress at the Serbian Parliament. Then on May 18th, we will have an additional discussion with Vuk Jeremic and with Sanda Rašković-Ivić. Mr. Jeremic, as most people know, he was the foreign minister of Serbia. He was the president of the United Nations General Assembly. He was a candidate for to be Secretary General of the United Nations and came up in second place. Now he is the leader of the People's Party, one of the leading opposition parties in Serbia. So we are looking to provide our viewers with opinions from across the spectrum and helping improve U.S.-Serbia relations. So please stay tuned. I almost forgot. On May 11th, we will also have His Excellency Bojan Vujic, the ambassador of Bosnia and Herzegovina to the United States. So these are the 3 programs that we have coming up. We have many, many more interesting things being planned. So stay tuned, follow us, and send us your suggestions. We are very interested in hearing what you have to say and what you have to suggest. I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon, a wonderful evening, and a great rest weekend. Thank you.
Greetings from Dečani. Hristos Voskrese.
Vaistino Voskrese.